Good morning, Allison. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I want to welcome you to the Tour of Holland podcast today. And we are excited because we're talking about Jackson, who is adorable.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So tell me all about him.
Oh my gosh. Well, where do I even begin? So Jackson is our sweet 6-year-old. Just had a birthday this month. And so that's always an exciting time because he likes to make it an entire month celebration. He was diagnosed before he was born at my 20-week ultrasound, actually, with a rare type of dwarfism known as Diastrophic Dysplasia. And the incidence range anywhere, depending on when you read, between 1 in 200,000 live births and 1 in 500,000. So it's on the real rare end of rare. And but that being said, we've been on just a very interesting and amazing journey in the people that we've met along the way, both with his diagnosis and other folks in the dwarfism and disability community. And he's thriving at kindergarten and active and hilarious and smart and kind and funny. And so 6 years is, well, a little more than 6 years, has a lot of things have happened. We've had some ups and downs, more ups and downs, which we're very fortunate for. And he loves Spider-Man. That's number one. He's a Spider-Man fanatic. The movies, the cartoons, and books, and Legos, and costumes. And he's known at school for Spider-Man, and known through social media exploits. I do post a good bit about him just because he's the light of our lives. And so yeah, that's him in a nutshell, I think.
Awesome. Well, so you got the diagnosis during the pregnancy. What was it like, that diagnosis for you?
Yeah, that was, up until that point in my life, and I think my husband would say the same thing, I don't think we felt like anything bad had happened to us. We hadn't had bad news or, any kind of tragedy or traumatic things, as adults. And, I was 35 and my husband is a few years older than I am. So, we weren't young to say that we hadn't lived a whole lot of life, but and so we went into this appointment for your typical 20-week anatomy scan, having no indication of there being anything that we were aware of or worried about or being tested for, anything out of the ordinary. And so as we're there having these measurements taken and pictures taken through the ultrasound tech, we don't know what's normal, what's not. And she's very quiet and it's taking kind of a long time. And, so I'm like a chatty person and like to know what's going on. So I'm just asking general questions, and she's pointing out some anatomy, but not giving a lot of warm and fuzzy. So we're like, oh yeah, look at this. That's great. And I also am very curious, like I said, wanting to know what's going on. And I'm watching as she's showing on the screen, the images, there's numbers and measurements, and she's, taking actual measurements. And I'm starting to notice there are, numbers in the corner that say your name and, what time in the, weeks in the pregnancy, 20, whatever it was, 20 and 4 days or something. And as she's measuring different things, and particularly measuring arm and leg bone length, that those numbers are not matching. And so I'm starting to think and have just this feeling like something is not as it should be. This doesn't feel quite normal. And so she says, okay, we're done for right now. The doctor will be in to talk to you. And we waited probably 45 minutes before anybody came back to the room.
Oh.
And so, my husband, it was kind of, I didn't really say anything to him. I think something's wrong, something's going on. But I just had that, just a sitting feeling okay, something is there's something is not as it should be or as we would have expected it. And sure enough, the doctor came in and said, so we think that from, based on the measurements and some of the images, that your son, we knew it was a boy at that point, has some type of dwarfism. And I just remember, I don't remember a whole ton right after that, because I just burst into tears, right? So that was how we found out that things were not, normal. And that, started a whole nother aspect to having, preparing and expecting, Jackson's birth. So yeah, that was, a day we in this chapter in this book that we wrote with the other parents of kids with dwarfism, that was the title of our chapter, was Moments. That was the moment, or, one of several that, changed. And it was, everything before that was before that, and everything after was, it slanted in a completely different direction for us. So yeah, it was not the best day ever, but looking back now, we have, obviously, like I said, everything seems kind of blurry. And I think because we haven't dwelled on that as like a bad day, but just this is how it happened. And this is when things changed.
Yeah, a turning point.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like I could go ask a lot of different kinds of questions. One thing that I'm curious about, if you know about it, is I've talked to a couple of other parents of a different form of dwarfism, and they both found out like at birth. So just know anything about why yours was caught or your child's was caught?
Yeah, so I think so dwarfism not just being rare, but because of the genes that are affected in diastrophic dysplasia, which is different from like the more common achondroplasia, affect the sulfate like production and the formation of the bone and cartilage. And that shows up much earlier. I don't know understand completely the science behind that, but it's visible much earlier because the measurements are much shorter.
Okay.
So, just I kind of generally in some other types of dwarfism, everything is looking and measuring normal until a lot later on. And so sometimes it's right before birth that things start to look a little different. Head size, long bone length. With diastrophics, it's very evident early because the difference is so much shorter. And that's true then, in life after after birth, the height and growth, I guess, ratio is significantly smaller. There's no set like this set of measurements, up to 3 feet is considered this kind of dwarfism, and above that is this kind of dwarfism. But generally, achondroplasia folks are somewhere, in that closer to 4 foot range as like a, full growth, as, mature adult, and, less than that, in various ranges in diastrophic. So that's one of the things that indicates that. There's also some other things besides just the length of bones and the, slower or difference in growth. What would be called, in a diagnosis, club feet, is something that is present, and that was also indicated. And in fact, when they gave us the diagnosis that it was some kind of dwarfism, they initially told us they thought it was osteogenesis imperfecta, which is fractures in addition to being short growth of the bones. And some of that was because of the the curvature on the feet. It was difficult to tell whether that was growth or whether those were, they were small fractures in there. And then there are typically some sort of deformity or cleft palate can be also present in diastrophic. That's not usually able to be seen early on in ultrasound, but there are some indications. Now, that wasn't something that they picked up. We had several continual rounds of ultrasounds and varying levels of severe, we had another ultrasound in within about a week's time with some, with a more specialized fetal medicine practice here in DC, that the ultrasound itself was like an hour and a half. Lots of pictures, more, like in detail, I'm not exactly sure equipment wise. I just know they were able to tell us a lot more information at that point. And so there's, some of those different features that combine together to give a good idea that it's one thing versus another. There's smaller size in the rib cage too. That's, can be present in lots of different forms of dwarfism, which of course gives the concern of, organs and lung development, and is there going to be space, and how will that work for respiratory issues at birth. The one thing that was comforting to us and good and helpful for us to know that early on was that this type of, based on the orthopedic issues related to it and not so many of the other issues, wasn't considered a lethal form, which meant that, barring anything more complicated, we started out from a place of hope. And then that's not where a lot of parents start out. One, because of the unknowns, and it's not, because it's so rare, lots of medical professionals aren't familiar and, maybe don't have the background or the research. And because there can be a number of things that don't seem, compatible with growth and, making it to full term, many parents, are given, that notice that this is not, this is not good. It could be fatal, or it's going to be terminal, or it's not, it's not going to provide for good quality of life. And I think from a medical professional standpoint, what I found in being able, having had we feel fortunate situation of having a diagnosis so early on, we were able to do a lot of research and ask a lot of questions and understand, what we thought we were getting ourselves into, what were the possibilities. And, we also had really good resources available to us from the medical profession, because we live in a metropolitan area and we're on the East Coast, and there's, driving distance from top to bottom is about 10 hours. So if we were needed to drive to Massachusetts, or we needed to drive to Florida to see someone that was the expert, we could do that. And it wasn't, we weren't impacted in that we didn't have access to the expertise. So, that, I think that was good for us. And I think the long story short, I'm knowing that early, is that a lot of parents, and we were also in this situation with the initial diagnosis, then because of it presenting early enough, if it's discovered early enough, it typically is more severe, whether that's lethal or not. Then medical professionals are in this position to say, you have some options, right? At 20 weeks, generally, I know different places in different states, they have the obligation to offer and make it known that termination is an option. And that takes lots of people, as you might imagine, by surprise, and that's an understatement. For us, certainly it was. We went to this appointment thinking we were going to get these great ultrasound pictures and how exciting, we couldn't wait to post it on Facebook. And, the doc says, your child has some form of dwarfism. And I just want to make sure you understand, you're at 20 weeks. So if there's a decision to be made. And we were like, whoa, like literally in about, 2.5 minutes, we went from finding, having nothing to be worried about and so excited, to being told that the options of what, this is our baby, So I think that goes across all kinds of, that's not just specific to families and kiddos with a diagnosis of dwarfism. I mean, there's all kinds of things, that happen in utero and are discovered that medicine being what it is, science is fantastic, but it's not everything. And so that makes it very hard, as a parent, you're in the position to decide, like, what is the best thing for my kid before my kid is even really here. And so I've, come to understand that with almost every parent that I've, encountered who had a, pre-birth diagnosis. That's been the conversation, and that's been the experience, some better than others, more easier to navigate through, but almost everyone, that changes your outlook and your hopefulness about this, child that you're bringing into the world, hopefully.
Well, you've pretty much answered my other half of that question.
Okay.
I was kind of assuming that you would feel like it was a blessing because you could prepare more before, like the urgency of the child being here and Jackson needing, focusing on, having the baby and having a newborn and all those things, you could have that all under your belt. So you kind of answered in how I was anticipating, but it's good to hear your take on it. So if you, like today, you could talk to Allison at that 20-week ultrasound, is there anything you wish you could tell yourself?
Yeah. I think that, I would tell myself to trust my gut and not be quite as worried about finding out all the information, right? I needed some certainty about what was happening. That's my personality. Like, how is this going to go? And I was already kind of a mess about, having a baby and like, this is going to change our lives. And, we don't know, but we're going to be prepared. We're going to have the nursery done. We're going to have the things bought. We're going to, have the daycare picked out. And then, this unsettling feeling like something is not quite right. And then to fix that, I was going to, research the heck out of it and find out exactly what I needed to know. So, when he was born, we're going to spend time in the NICU. He's going to need some respiratory support. We need to find these doctors, right on down the line, and just, say, relax and just trust your gut. Because we knew as soon as we had the fully in-depth diagnosis from the ultrasound, I say that now, knew that he was going to be fine. But we continued to worry with these what ifs and what's going to happen. And so I would say, trust your gut and things are going to turn out the way they're supposed to turn out.
Do you think that has made any shifts for you in your way world and your personality as far as like that need for certainty?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that I've always been a planner. So, it's maybe flipped me to the far other side of not planning for things. Sometimes, in case that this birthday party that's happening tomorrow is as an example, we decided we were going to do it. We booked it. We put on the calendar. And then like last week, my husband says, is that party happening this weekend? We were kind of like, oh yeah, old me would have had it, invitations done. And some of that's being a parent, right? You can't, you don't have quite the same bandwidth to control things and prep maybe that you used to. So I think that's definitely changed. I don't need all of that to know that things are going to be okay, which I think is a good thing. I think for me personally, when it comes to my life and my work and family, that it's helped me, sort out those priorities. And I think having a child does that anyway. But, when I look at my work and the amount of time I spent, and work was the most important thing, probably, I would say that admittedly before Jackson. And now if there's a project that's undone or something happens and things don't go the way that they needed to go or should have gone, that's life. Like, the unexpected happens and you figure out how to recover from it or move forward with it and make the best of it. And you survive that. So I think that's been a lesson for me. That wasn't your exact question, but
Heard it. Well, tell me, Mr. Jackson, he's 6 now. He goes to kindergarten.
Yeah.
What's his day-to-day life, and how does his diagnosis affect him on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that's been I think that's been the thing that we knew would be what we had to confront, is that life for him is going to be different in, let me take that back. Life is not different for him than it is for other 6 years old. But he has to find his way to do the things that he wants to be able to do, and that that he can do as a 6-year-old. So, that really boils down to, accommodations and adaptations in the physical realm. That's, by and large, the biggest, most challenging thing for him. I don't think it's as challenging for us, because, as adults, we can see things and like have some forethought, knowing, what he's going to want to do. Like, we knew we needed to find a bike that wasn't going to be off the shelf at Walmart, because he was going to want, he's going to want to have that opportunity. And when he was a baby, there wasn't as much of that, because he was a baby. He was a smaller baby. The biggest thing we had to grapple with was clothing. Like this onesie that was the 3-month-old onesie is still wearing it when he's, 18 months, or, that's not exactly correct, but, he's in a, smaller size clothes. And, but now, everything, we've got stools in the house to accommodate him being able to get to things and be independent in the restroom and in the kitchen. And, like at the table, I'm sitting at the kitchen table right now. We have a, like kind of a chair that he can get in and out of that puts him table height. And I think with school, he's been in a school setting since he was about 18 months. For daycare, it's a Montessori style school. And so they've been really instrumental in helping him find ways to find solutions. And in fact, that's, when he had one teacher who said, well, Jackson, let's find a solution. And, then she'd say, that's a good one. That's not such, if you want to climb up on something, that's not such a good solution. Let's try another one. And so I think that, in his day-to-day life, the physical, environment has been challenging and is going to continue to be. He stayed in kindergarten at this private school that we started him at through daycare. And so he'll go to public school in first grade, and that's going to be a whole nother situation. We're just starting to deal with, working through what's going to be required and what we're going to be able to, negotiate isn't the right word, but need for them to provide in the school setting for him to be able to be safe and have access to, everything that his peers do. And so for him, that's challenging, because he's starting to know that he's not able to do things in the same way. And some days that bothers him, and some days it doesn't. He just goes about his business. But I think that is the biggest thing with his day-to-day life, is that some days are totally fine and perfect and it doesn't come up. And then some days he comes home and he's really upset. And that's hard as a mom, because we knew that would be the thing that he'd have to deal with. He wasn't going to have maybe the medical challenges that are stressful and scary for other parents, but the disappointment is maybe the way to say that, or the chat, and not being able to 100% understand, empathize, certainly, but I can't imagine what that must be like, because it's easy for me to say, well, try this, or let's do this instead. And so we're starting to have some more conversations around that, because he knows about his dwarfism. We talk about it. When he was probably 3, starting to be, getting ready to turn 4, right before COVID kind of changed things, it was becoming apparent to him, he was much smaller than all of his peers. And so, we talked about that. We'd always talked about, and never really shied away from that idea, and talking around him or in front of him, or, about him when he was littler. But we've never put that first. So, he often points things out when we, we would have never raised raised an issue. We've left that to him. If it bothers him, he can, he can speak up about it. We're not going to point it out to him. If there's something that, is challenging. He wanted to play soccer with his friends, in the fall of 2020. And we were like, that's great. One of the, parents was going to be the coach, which felt good. They knew him and kind of were prepared to navigate, if there were things that needed to be done differently, which there wasn't a whole lot, but he very quickly realized he couldn't keep up with the other kiddos. And so that was a source of frustration, but he wanted to be with his friends. So, he stuck it out, but we'd go to the game on Saturday. He'd run around for about 10 minutes and say like, no, I'm done. And, at the end of the season, he said, I don't really want to play soccer anymore. I didn't score that many goals. It wasn't that fun. It's hard. And so, we didn't want to say like, well, too bad, you're going to have to do hard things. But, we talked through that, like encouraging him to talk about what that meant and, why that felt bad or why that didn't feel good and how that, was okay, but, didn't matter. No, it wasn't being judged by anyone. And so, yeah, I think that's, I know, like I said, we kind of almost felt good about things as they were happening when he was a baby, because everything kind of worked itself out and fell into place. And now I think we're going to absorb more of the challenges on the emotional side of things.
Mm-hmm. Start to navigate different things.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it might be good to get him around some peers. Have you guys started to think about that?
That are in the little people community, you mean? Yes. So that's been super helpful. Leading kind of up to now, we have a kind of a small group here in DC of another couple of families that we get together with, but has very much become obvious with some of the things he's asking about, like, how do I do that? Or I want to do it like the other kids, and not having the answer. And also too, I think one of the things that I wish I had realized early on, that reaching out and as a parent, becoming, connected with other adults in the dwarfism community could have been helpful. We have quite a large network across all over, social media and through some of the local group here of adults. We have, one of a really good friend of ours now who's came out to his soccer games. And what's wonderful for us is, while became friends with her because she's a little person, like that's not the reason. We have all these things in common. And so it's been eye-opening for us as parents to appreciate, having different people in our lives. So I think that's definitely something that we're going to need to lean on for him as he's going through school. So he's got someone, not just a parent or not just other kids his age, but older children who have, been where he's been. And we have happened upon a couple of families now in our actual local community who've been through, not the school he will be at, but through the school, schools here. So I think that's kind of the next step on the advocacy, encouragement for him, which will, help us help him better, I guess.
Yeah, I would think that was kind of like mentors,
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, tell me one of your favorite memories of Jackson.
Oh my gosh. I think probably one of my favorite memories, and it's so fun now with, smartphones and social media to have saved, right? Things, is the time that he stood on his own for the first time and was, took his first steps. He was older than 2. He was probably about 2 and 2 months. And it just was priceless. And like I said, it's so wonderful to have this video because the look on his face when he like realized what he had done. And I don't, now I think like, was it the look on our face that prompted the look on his face? But I don't know if other parents with their little ones, when they first take their steps, if there's that recognition of how important and how amazing that is, because he had the opportunity to see all these other kids on their feet and going. And he'd been using a walker and a gait trainer in the classroom for, the better part of 6 months, and had been not excited about that at all. And so I think that was motivating, because, that was probably the first time he had a little glimpse into not being able to do things the same way and do things that other kids were doing. So that's something that I'll, always stick out for me. And yeah, that's just a really good memory.
Oh, and you got it captured. That's awesome.
Yeah.
For many years, treasure that.
Yeah.
Is there anything in particular you'd like people to know about Jackson?
Well, in particular, what I like people to know about Jackson, gosh, he's connecting with others. I think is one of the questions you said was, what's his superpower? I think that's his superpower. And I think in a way that he gets noticed wherever we go. And sometimes it's never, or at least at this point has not been really negative attention. Because he's biasedly, so I'll say, pretty stinking adorable. But that's a lot of times now what happens is he gets noticed and says, oh, look at that little guy, he's so cute, or oh, my mom, look at the baby, he's adorable. And he's very quick to not take offense, but say like, I'm not a baby, I'm 6, my name's Jackson. And he just does not have any problem, speaking up and talking and initiating, that kind of conversation or conversation for a 6-year-old, what's your name? I love Spider-Man. What's your favorite? Whatever. I think that's just, I think, going to be such a benefit to him. And, we see that all the time. And just the way people are drawn to him, whether it's, curiosity, truly at first sight, or, because he's pretty cute, but he just has a light and a joy that I think draws people in. And so I think that, that will help him in the future to, navigate when there are challenges related to, his obvious differences.
Definitely. Is he pretty outgoing?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm very outgoing. His dad is a lot more reserved. And so it's a good compliment. He's got I think the best parts of us, few of the not so great parts, but that's with any child, right?
We can swing it that way. Parts. What do you feel like is your greatest lesson so far from parenting?
Oh gosh. I think my favorite lesson, or my greatest lesson, is learning to let go, kind of what I was talking about as the planner side of me, and expectations. And I think not having expectations for your child obviously you have expectations for your child, but just being able to sit and let that unfold and see not just who they are going to be, but really appreciate who they are and, adjust accordingly. And, and just in life then in general, it's, I think, allowed me to probably enjoy life more than I maybe had even in the early days with him, because there was so much expectation about what's next and what should he be doing and what should we be doing, should we be doing these therapies and should we be doing this surgery, or when's the right time to do that. And so kind of letting go of some of the things in terms of what the expectations are, whether they're, other people's expectations or external, expectations and pressure, and just letting him be who he is, and in turn, just letting us be who we are going to be. I think that's been a life lesson for all of us as a family.
Definitely. And when you have an expectation, it's kind of like of the future, which no one, so most likely it won't be.
You're going to be disappointed.
It sets you up for disappointment in general, I think, most of the time. That's something I've been learning as well. I think
it's hard, I think, as a parent. For sure.
Do you have any advice for other parents?
Do I have advice for other parents? Gosh, I don't know. I think that I would say and I guess not, just parents with kiddos, that have any kind of challenges, but just in general, I think knowing how to, figuring out how to advocate for your child could really the singular most important thing. And I don't mean that in a way of being a helicopter parent and stepping in all the time, but knowing what they need. And that's kind of that idea of seeing who they are and not looking forward to who they should be or what they should be or what you want for them, but really trying to appreciate who they are so that you can help them and meet them where they are. I think we learned that through our experience early on with the medical side of things, and that I think I felt like, okay, these are medical professionals, right? These are the doctors, they're experts, they should tell us what to do, right? We'll do whatever we'll do, whatever's going to be best for Jackson. That they certainly will. That's what they'll be telling, that's what they will know, and they will tell us. And given his diagnosis, not even particularly the kind of dwarfism was rare, but just dwarfism in general, we found that he had a very prolonged stay in the NICU, not really because he needed it or because he was, struggling, but because this was the standard of care. And so he needed to meet their benchmarks to be, and so from a medical standpoint, I said, okay, what does he need to do? So talking about expectations, what's the expectation for us to pack him up and take him out of here? And so what part of that can I contribute to? And at the time, the main issue was he had feeding issues because of the cleft palate structure inside. He has what's called a bifid uvula. So in the back of the throat, he's got two kind of right before you get to the tonsils there. And that soft tissue can be a problem for, particularly in diastrophic, because it doesn't form, it's not as sturdy as it needs to be for feeding. So some kids have also respiratory issues, tracheomalacia or laryngomalacia, and that's what he had in addition. So he was having a really hard time eating. And obviously that's the thing they're looking for. Are they gaining weight? Are we going to send them home and they're going to be struggling and, failure to thrive, all of this kind of stuff. So we, understood from our conversations with the ENT, and she knew his diagnosis, that this is what was going on, and that it wasn't an acute problem, that he would grow out of it, and he'd grow out of it very quickly. But in the interim, what do we need to do to ensure he's fed and nourished and growing? But to the far side of that, so, their scale is how much weight is he gaining, and how much we're measuring, how much we're feeding him, and, oh, he didn't eat enough yesterday, that's not good. all scaled, not specifically for someone who is a little person. And so I had to do some legwork and some research and keep saying, I know I'm not the medical expert, but this is what we understand to be true. Can you look at this information? Can we put you in touch with these people? Can you really, listen to what we're telling you? Because I know this is probably 1 out of 100 kids you've got right now, and he's our most important. We understand he's not your most important. And so, we finally had a couple of the feeding specialists and the speech, therapists kind of got their heads together and started looking at what we were asking to look at. And I said, if he has to go home with a feeding tube, whatever we need to do, if that's what's going to get us out of here. And that, because I knew once we got out of there, and we could see that, we could then take him to these specialists in in dwarfism, that he wasn't in any danger. Like, we just needed to leave and get where we needed to be. And so that was uncomfortable for me, because I felt, I was challenging some, authority. And but that's what needed to be done. Who knows? He might have been there. He could have still been there. No, he wouldn't have been. But that was at like 30 some dazy, and he ended up being there 48, I think. And so as a new mom, you were talking about how parents who find out at birth struggle, because they're all the things trying to be, kind of a new mom and new parent, and you've got this newborn that you don't know anything, everything's different than what you thought. I think tripped me up, because I was trying to be prepared and thought I was all ready. And then, same thing, you've got like the new mom, everything's happening. And so it took us a couple of weeks to kind of work ourselves back to like, okay, this is the information we know. This is how we need to, push forward for him and make sure all these other people who are, now involved, it's not just us calling the shots and making decisions for him, this team of people who are, keeping us from doing what we felt was best. So that was really challenging, but, I look back on that as a really big opportunity as a person, for me to be able to grow and learn how to advocate for him. And I know now going forward, we're going to have to do that with school. So I think for any parent, listening to your, kind of your gut and knowing what your kid needs, regardless of what other people are saying they need, sometimes is the best thing.
Yeah. And I liked how you were like, this is where we're trying to get. What contribute to get us there and meet them.
I spent one night overnight doing kind of the feeding cycle with them to see what was happening, because you're a new mom, you've had a C-section. They're like, he's fine. All he's doing is eating and sleeping. Go home and sleep. And so after a couple, 2 weeks of that, I was like, what is going on? Because I'm here all day. Something's happening at night. And, kind of put the pieces together. And I said, okay, X, Y, and Z. Okay, we will do X, Y, and Z. And then we're done and we're out the door.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Sometimes is a process.
Yeah.
Planting the seeds. Okay, we want to go home now. So how can that happen in the shortest time?
Right.
Safety and well-being, but yes.
Right. Yeah.
And then get home and enjoy the time of that, hard and beautiful new days.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's totally good. Hard and beautiful.
What are your thoughts on the future with Jackson? Is there anything in particular you're looking forward to? Other than
I think that in the future, the transition to school is obviously what's right around the corner. And I don't know, looking forward to it, yes. I feel a little bit right now, I think similar, this interview couldn't have come at a better time. And I think you're getting you're obviously getting some raw emotion, but we're kind of embarking on a similar process to when we first found out his diagnosis with this school situation, and sharing everything we know with them, and what we've gotten to know about him, and again advocating for what he needs. But I think that teaching him now to advocate for himself, because, you know, we're not going to be there in the day to day. I know there's going to be frustrations. And I was just talking with, you know, one of the administrators at the school where he's been, and, you know, just saying how grateful we are for all those lessons that he's learned about, you know, problem solving, really, for himself. And, you know, like I said, this teacher he had who would say, well, let's find a solution. And he'd try something and that wouldn't be good. And she'd say, let's find try another solution. And he'd come home and say, it was a solid solution, Mom. Miss Katie told me that's a solid solution. So, and, you know, he'd take that and run. So he'd had some, you know, seen some success and then felt good about having to take it upon himself to find a way to do what he wanted to do, and knowing that he had to do it or has to do it in a way that's different from, you know, from his peers. And I think that will be the main struggle in the future, is, you know, wanting to be like everyone else, not wanting to stick out and be different. And he's already different. So, you know, trying to find a middle ground and keeping that perspective.
Definitely. This might be good for you to listen to in a year.
Yes, I think you're right. You're like, what was I worried about?
I was so nervous, but it all worked out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any resources you'd like to mention that have been really helpful for y'all?
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of generic, but I don't know how we would have navigated everything we did without social media. I know it sounds crazy to say, but being able to connect with some of the community, the little people community, in the ways that we haven't. I mean, number one, other parents, to compare, you know, any parent does that, you know, mom groups abound, right? This is a, you know, pretty specific mom group. But then also then being able to, you know, discover and connect with the community of other little people, adults, and, you know, volunteers and resources from that standpoint. I mean, that was, they tell you, right, when you get pregnant or when something happens, like, don't Google it, don't look it up on the internet, right? You're going to see the worst things. But that's what you know, that's me. I wanted to know. So I did. And that's how that's, I think, really what put us at ease fairly early on, because we were able to find information that said, he's going to be okay, basically. And so that was really a lifesaver to us. But some of the parents that we found through groups online were just, you know, a lifeline when we needed it. And now, you know, in real life, you know, some really great relationships we've built. And I think that, you know, you can't undervalue the journey together with, you know, other people, and support that comes along with that. And I think that the other thing, I know it maybe sounded a little bit like we didn't have the greatest start in support from, you know, medical professionals in the beginning, but that's not to say that they weren't great. They just didn't know what they didn't know. And I think finding, you know, looking to find the right resources and not, you know, settling for what's available maybe is the best, is a really good thing for anyone, you know, again, researching and finding out, you know, whatever the challenge you're having or whatever the diagnosis is, like where, you know, who's the expert on this, or who knows the most, or, you know, where should we be looking?
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. And I think I'm often find it interesting that not so many, but several families that we know who've, you know, either not you know, lived in an area that had access to, you know, like I said, you know, metropolitan area, or, you know, advanced, you know, medical facilities, just, were like, well, we didn't know. Some families who didn't have a diagnosis till 3 or 4 months. And in my head, I think like, no, like you just keep going until you find it. But on the flip side, you've got this new, baby, and what's the priority? Spending time, or, some parents have said it didn't matter to us what the diagnosis was. We're going to do what we were going to do regardless. So I get that. But I think finding the right resources, by researching is really valuable, even if it's not doesn't feel like your skill set. And therapists that we didn't know we needed in the beginning. We had the fortune that in the state of Virginia, if you have a baby that stays in the NICU over 30 days, you automatically qualify for services through the early intervention program. And I think it's similar in most places. But, we hadn't even thought about that and like what we could be doing for him early on from a non-medical intervention standpoint that he would need. Mm-hmm. And that fell into our laps. And so that was really valuable too. I think when the opportunity to talk with you, and I thought, gosh, yes, like speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, like all of those people were super helpful in the beginning for us that, as a new parent, even with an average height child, you're trying to figure out what are the milestones and tummy time and what should they be doing and all these things. And so to have this baby that was different in so many ways physically, it was hugely helpful to have the resource, like, is this the right thing to do? Or how can we, again, finding the adaptation, how can we do that for him? Or how can he do that? So I think that was really beneficial, finding the right person in that area as well for your kids.
Did you guys find the right people right off the bat, or did you have to make some changes?
We actually did. And I think at the point that happened, we had just come home, and I think I was coming off my like mama bear high of like breaking my kid out of the NICU. And so when we had our, I think our intake appointment, I made it very clear, this is rare. I will bet you anything that you don't have anyone that knows what to do with us. And so I think I kind of challenged them. So they found it took the most experienced person, the toughest person to handle the toughest cases. And that was exactly who we needed. And so that worked in our favor. I know that doesn't always happen, right? Like sometimes doesn't work out, and you have to, figure out from one to the next and try a few things with some missteps. But that first physical therapist, Jenny Ann, she was definitely a little strange and like kind of off, like not what we were expecting, but she like set us straight. No, you need to work on these things with him. If you want him to be able to do everything he can do, like this is what you need to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And we were ready to go. And that was really helpful for us. And I think, as he got started in the daycare setting and in school, that was a really cool opportunity, because again, we didn't know, like, he definitely needs a different chair, but, we were searching around, and there was the physical therapist that we had at the time then was a different physical therapist, but she had been in the school with another student. So, she had kind of the right idea about what was available and what they could do. So we didn't have to fight with anybody about, changing around furniture or accommodating stools. And so I just feel like we were blessed along the way to have the right people at the right time. Mm-hmm. When it came to, things that he needed. So, they say, I know, like, all things happen for a reason. That's not to say like that's totally true, but I think the stars kind of line up for you when they need to. So that was good for us.
Good. Are there any common misconceptions, dwarfism, special needs that you'd like to correct?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I think that, and that's really, I think one of the reasons as a mom, I feel like it's important to be able to speak up for Jackson. I mean, not so much for him, but for this, the kind of the larger journey in terms of people who are different, kids who are different. And so I think that one of the things we hear or have seen, and I probably even thought beforehand, was, how do you interact and how do you approach people who are different? And that typical image of the mom saying, don't point, shush, shush, like cross paths with somebody in a wheelchair in the store or something out in public, and just encouraging people to say, it's okay to ask questions and to, be curious, but, be polite, just like you would to anyone else. People are people, no matter what they look like. The packaging on the outside looks like. And that different doesn't mean there's anything wrong. But that's what it is. It's just a difference. And, letting your kids be curious about that and helping them, navigate that curiosity, like I said, in a kind and respectful way. And some of that comes from, as if you're a parent, from your discomfort and your, point of view of being curious. So, allow yourself and allow your kiddos to be curious.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. I don't have anything else to ask you. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I don't think so. I think I went through some of those questions and made notes, but none of that, didn't have any tears when I was making notes.
Aw. Well,
I appreciate you indulging me.
it's just, things come up, those feelings, they bubble up.
Yeah.
It's to be expected. But thank you for being so honest and open and vulnerable and sharing your story about Jackson. I loved hearing about him and your journey. I think you had a lot of great things that other listeners can benefit from listening to. And hopefully
good.
Do take some time to listen to this again in a year.
I'm excited too.
Excited how far you've come with the whole school thing. So that'll
Absolutely.
be a good record. I provide some ways for listeners to connect with you online.
Absolutely. So like I said, we do share Jackson on social media, for better or worse. And so the easiest way to find me or find him is probably Instagram. We have an Instagram. My Instagram is Allie, ALLIE 0126. And he is Jack Harvey G on Instagram. And I also give my email. I'm an open book, literally. After writing working with the ladies and writing this book, we're have opened ourselves up to sharing our stories. So I'm happy to connect with people too.
Yeah. Do you want me to add that?
Oh yeah, sorry. Sure. It's HARV as in Victor 79 at Gmail.
HARV79 at Gmail. Sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. It was wonderful meeting with you, and I'm looking forward to posting this episode.
Awesome. Thanks, April. I appreciate all you're doing, and the podcast is really a fantastic resource for families, parents, just community in general.
Thank you. All right. Have a great
weekend.
too. Bye.
Thanks.